Before I start my questions, I ask unanimous consent to add 3 articles to the record, one being the National Library of Medicine version of the Hippocratic Oath, one being an ACOG practice bulletin, clinical management guidelines for medication abortion, and an article from lifenews.com from earlier this week. Kamala Harris says unborn babies are not real human beings. Ask unanimous consent to put these in the record.
Request for inclusion of documents in the record will be considered at the end of the hearing. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. I agree with Dr. Resnick that these are important questions and they require a lot of thoughtful activity on the part of the committee. Again, I'll just state for the record that it is unfortunate that we have 5 witnesses opposed and only 1 in favor of the Republican position. The good news is that Dr. Francis seems to be up to the task and is able to hold her own with this 5-to-1 ratio. So Dr. Francis, let me ask you, as an OB-GYN, does every OB-GYN prior to Dobbs, does every OB-GYN in the country do abortions?
No. In fact, if you look at surveys done by actually abortion providers of OBGYNs in practice in the US, what it showed that anywhere between 76 and 93% of OBGYNs do not perform abortions, which to me says that they understand that elective abortion is not healthcare. We are women's healthcare professionals, and I don't know of another essential healthcare procedure that up to 93% of OBGYNs do not provide.
And Dr. Verma, is that consistent with your information?
My understanding of the data is that the vast majority of OBGYNs, over 85%, will connect a patient with needed abortion care,
yeah, but they don't
even if they don't provide the
abortion,
services.
which Dr. Francis has told us is the purposeful ending of an unborn life.
That rate is not my understanding.
I think it's high, and I think Dr. Francis is correct. So here's the thing. Prior to Dobbs, 92%, or even if it's, take the lower number, 80% of OB-GYNs, when faced with a patient having a miscarriage, would do what? They would treat the patient having a miscarriage. Or faced with a patient with an ectopic pregnancy, they would treat the patient. I consider myself a pro-life OB-GYN. Practiced for 25 years. Never once did I hesitate to take care of a patient who had suffered a spontaneous incomplete miscarriage, a spontaneous incomplete AB. I mean, it is something that you just do, and never would I have expected that someone would have second-guessed that decision. But the problem where we find ourselves now is that we've actually invited some of the controversy that is that people are decrying. So Dr. Francis, let me just ask you, I mean, you go to some lengths to talk about the necessity for the proper handoff, and like anyone else practicing OB-GYN in a community hospital, I received significant number of complicated cases of which I had no prior knowledge. So the condition of a warm handoff between providers is one that really ought to be thought through, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's crucial to patient safety, and I as well have taken care of many women who have presented to my local emergency room with complications of their abortions. I got no patient handoff from the abortion provider. I had only the word of the woman to go on, which, you know, my patients are good historians, but they may not have known all of the details of the procedure that they went through or the medication that they received, which any of us who are physicians know that's crucial to being able to care for our patients. And, you know, if I can just address to one other thing, in that I too have heard the stories about physicians hesitating to take care of women with miscarriages or with ectopic pregnancies. But that, at least as far, and again, I'm not a legal expert, but at least as far as the laws that I have seen, that is not the fault of the law. It's the fault of the hospital systems or the state departments of health, that it's their responsibility to educate their physicians on what the law says and what it means.
That is absolutely correct. A hospital does not perform a D&C, the doctor does. The hospital's decision is not the end of the story. The doctor has to be involved. Dr. Verma, let me just ask you, because I referenced ACOG practice bulletin, and one of the things that concerned me in the practice bulletin about medication abortion up to 70 days of gestation is the recommendations on whether to give ROGAM after the administration of that medication, And right at the end of the paragraph where they talk about it, they say that you might weigh whether it's necessary at all to give RhoGAM to an early termination of pregnancy. I mean, RH-ISU immunization, I'm not aware of anything you can do to help the person become un-RH-ISU immunized after it happens. Are you?
Thank you for that question. So there's been some really powerful data that's come out over the past few years that show that with an early miscarriage or an early abortion, that the level of blood transfer from the pregnancy to the bloodstream of the patient is too low for RhoGAM to be indicated, and it may be.
Let me just insert, but that is not zero.
Gentlemen's time's
once
expired.
ISO immunization has occurred,
Gentlemen's time's
you cannot
expired.
undo
Ms.
it.
Custer, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much.